He never said he loved you. He never promised you forever. He didn't show up the way you needed him to. And still, he cannot forget you. He avoids your name, but still checks your presence. He doesn't call, but watches your stories. He pretends. He moved on, but there is a tension in the silence, a residue of connection that never really burned away. You wonder why. Why someone who never fully chose you keeps returning in subtle ways. Why someone who held back so much continues to feel so close in your energy. Why the person who couldn't commit still can't seem to let go. The answer lies not in what he gave you, but in what you reflected back to him. Carl Jung believed that the people who leave the deepest marks on us are not always the ones we love consciously, but the ones who mirror back the hidden parts of ourselves. You weren't just a woman he dated. You were a mirror he couldn't look away from, a mirror that showed him something both terrifying and magnetic. He may not have loved you in the way you wanted, but you awakened something he wasn't ready to see, and that awakening, once triggered, cannot be undone. When he met you, he may have been emotionally unavailable, distracted, broken, or distant, but none of that stopped him from being affected by you, because energy moves differently than logic, and you did not move through his life quietly. You stirred something in his unconscious. You activated parts of him that had long been buried under avoidance, fear, and detachment. You didn't just offer attention, you offered emotional presence, and that presence left an imprint. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. He showed up with softness in a world that taught him to be hard. You stayed open in moments where he had only learned to close, and whether he showed it or not, his nervous system noticed, his psyche noticed, his body felt it even when his mind denied it. He can't forget you, because forgetting you would require forgetting the part of himself that came alive in your presence. And that part, once seen, cannot be unseen. Sometimes, a woman enters a man's life not to be his partner, but to be his catalyst. She disrupts the patterns, she interrupts the cycles, becomes the silence he can't ignore once she's gone. You were that disruption, and even if he never loved you, he was affected by you in ways that love, as we know it, cannot always define. Carl Jung spoke often about the anima, the feminine image, within the male unconscious. According to Jung, every man carries a symbolic, feminine within him, and when he encounters a woman who embodies qualities that resonate with this inner image, he becomes captivated, not because he consciously chooses her, but because she activates his soul memory. She awakens an internal recognition, a vibration, a longing. You were not just a person in his timeline. You were a reflection of his inner feminine, the tenderness he denies, the connection he craves, the vulnerability he fears, and that kind of encounter cannot be erased, even if he runs from it. He didn't need to love you to be transformed by you. He only needed to feel, and even if he tried to suppress it, he felt your emotional depth, he felt your absence of games, he felt the way you looked at him, not for who he pretended to be, but for who he really was. And that kind of seeing is rare. That kind of seeing penetrates the mask. It touches the soul. It disarms the defense. So now, even as he tells himself, it wasn't serious, even as he distracts himself with others, there is a part of him that stays with you. Not because you were chasing him, but because you aren't. He can't forget you because you gave him something he couldn't find elsewhere. You gave him an experience of emotional intimacy, even if he didn't have the capacity to return it. You made him feel without demanding that he fix himself. You loved him without making him earn it. And that kind of love doesn't disappear. It lingers. It lives in the body. It echoes in quiet moments when no one is around. Even if he never loved you, you were a doorway, a portal into a part of himself he hadn't accessed before. And sometimes, the soul remembers what the ego tries to erase. Your connection wasn't just about romance. It was spiritual, symbolic, archetypal. It wasn't about what happened, it was about what was awakened, and the most haunting part is that he may never fully understand what you were to him, only that he feels the space you once filled. This is the kind of imprint that doesn't require explanation. It doesn't need mutual understanding. It doesn't need closure, because its purpose was never to last. It was to open, and you did. You opened something in him, and even if he never comes back, even if he never says a word, part of him will always carry the imprint of your presence. You may think he forgot, but souls don't forget what shifted them, and neither should you. There's a reason his energy still lingers. Even if his words never reached you, he may not have shown up with consistency, may not have met your needs, may have even walked away without explanation. But the connection wasn't built on surface behavior. It was built in the invisible realm, the one where souls recognize each other, even when the personalities are unprepared. He can't forget you because forgetting you would mean forgetting the feeling of being truly seen. And that kind of memory is not stored in the brain. It lives in the body, in the way his heart tightened when you spoke softly, in the way his guard loosened without him noticing, in the way time slowed when you were near. That's what haunts him, not just who you were, but who he was becoming in your presence. Not because you asked him to change, but because something in him wanted to rise to meet you. And when he didn't, when he stayed frozen in fear or pride, a fracture occurred, one that now follows him into every new interaction. Because no matter how many bodies he touches, they don't carry your energy. No matter how many conversations he entertains, none of them quiet his mind the way yours did. No matter how free he pretends to be, a part of him remains tied to what could have been. Carl Jung believed that the greatest tragedies of the psyche come not from what happens, but from what was never faced. And this is exactly what happens to a man who lets a woman like you slip away. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to care the way you needed. And now, he's left with silence, with flashes of memory, with unresolved emotion that he cannot name. So he moves on physically, but emotionally, he's split. A part of him is still standing where he left off, still wondering what it all meant, still feeling more than he will ever admit. You didn't need his love to leave a mark. You only needed to be real in a world where most people wear masks. And that's why he can't forget. Because even if he never loved you, he will never be the same after knowing you. Before we go deeper, if something in this message is waking up a truth inside you, the Jung Method can help you understand the patterns behind connection, projection, and emotional memory. The link is pinned in the first comment. He thought he could walk away and forget. He told himself it was not that serious, that you would move on, and he would too, that whatever this was between you would dissolve in time. But what he didn't realize is that certain people don't leave quietly. They echo. They move into the empty rooms of your mind and sit there long after the door has been closed. And now, in moments when everything else goes quiet, he hears you again. Not your voice, but your presence. The way you looked at him when you were vulnerable. The way your eyes held more truth than he was ready to receive. The way your energy surrounded him, not demanding anything, just being. He thought forgetting you would be easy. But he underestimated the impact of emotional resonance. You didn't scream, you didn't chase, you didn't beg to be remembered. You simply existed in your full emotional truth, and that alone was enough to leave a scar on his soul. Not the kind that wounds, but the kind that marks. Because you touched something that had been asleep for a long time. You reminded him of a version of himself he forgot existed. The one that could feel, the one that could be soft, the one that wanted to be loved, but didn't know how to receive it. Carl Jung taught that what we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate, and fate has a strange way of circling back to what was left unresolved. You may have walked away, you may have healed, you may have built a life without him, but your energy still lives in the space he refused to enter. The space of truth, the space of presence, the space of love that does not demand, but transforms. He cannot forget you because in your presence, he tasted something real, and real is rare. Most people perform love, they perform interest, they perform passion, but you did not perform. You felt, and that difference is what burned itself into his memory. He did not expect to be changed, but your presence disarmed his defenses. You didn't argue with his avoidance. You didn't try to force closeness. You allowed your being to speak louder than words. And now, in your absence, he realizes how loud that presence really was. It's not that he loved you and lost you. It's that he never allowed himself to love you fully, and now he has to live with that. He will meet others, he will try again, but something will always feel incomplete, not because you were the only one meant for him, but because he never stepped into the version of himself that could have held you. And that version, once glimpsed, becomes a haunting, not a memory of what was, but of what could have been. He can't forget you because he saw a possibility through you, a possibility for connection, for softness, for something beyond the surface, and he couldn't take it. His walls were too high, his fear too loud, his past too present. But now, without you, all those excuses sound hollow. They don't protect him from the ache that rises when he's alone. They don't shield him from the questions that come late at night when he realizes he didn't just lose a woman, He lost the mirror that showed him who he could have become. This is the psychology of energy, of imprint, of soul-level recognition. You weren't just another experience. You were a turning point. Whether he grows from it or runs from it is not your concern. What matters is that you know your impact was never defined by his ability to acknowledge it. His silence does not erase your significance. His detachment does not undo the connection. You may think he has forgotten, that he replaced you, that he's moved on without a second thought, but that's only what the surface shows. Underneath, there is unrest, a tension between who he is and who he glimpsed through you, a tugging at his unconscious, a quiet realization that he let something sacred slip through his fingers, not because it wasn't real, but because he wasn't ready. He will think of you when the world gets quiet, when he meets someone new and doesn't feel that pull, when he sees a look that almost feels like yours but doesn't quite reach his core, when he hears a song that reminds him of something he couldn't name then and still can't name now. These are not obsessions. These are echoes of emotional truth, the kind that doesn't fade with time because it wasn't built on fantasy. It was built on resonance. Carl Jung wrote about the power of archetypes, the universal images that shape human experience. In his inner world, you became an archetype, the woman who sees without needing, the presence that softens without words, the mirror that shows, not shames. And that kind of archetype does not get filed away like an old contact. It becomes part of his inner landscape, a reminder of something he avoided, a signal of what love could feel like if only he were ready. You didn't need him to validate what you were. You already knew, even in your pain, even in your confusion, even when you questioned yourself. Somewhere deep inside, you knew this connection was not about getting him, it was about finding you, about realizing that your depth is not too much, that your emotional availability is not a weakness, that your presence is a gift, even if he wasn't ready to receive it. And now, your detachment is your power. Because it is not empty, it is not cold. It is the kind of detachment that comes from completion. You did not leave anything undone. You offered what was true. You held your part. You felt deeply, and then you let go. Not to punish, not to prove, but because staying any longer would have meant betraying your own soul. He will remember that. He will remember the woman who didn't need to destroy him to walk away. The one who didn't slam doors or burn bridges. The one who simply stopped showing up for what could not meet her where she stood. And that kind of exit lingers. Not because of drama, but because of clarity. A clarity that exposes all the places where he still hides from himself. You were not forgotten. You were not insignificant. You were not a phase. You were a crossroad. And though he may keep walking, a part of him will always look back, not to find you, but to understand what he missed when he wasn't paying attention. Let that be enough. Let that be the closure. Not his return, not his apology, but your knowing. The knowing that you left something good behind because you finally realized that you were something good all along. You were not here to be chosen. You were here to remember that you were never lost. And now that you have, there is nothing left to chase, only peace to live in. Asterisk, what he remembers most is not what you said, but how he felt around you. Not the details of the conversations, but the atmosphere you created. The stillness, the depth, the way time slowed when you looked at him with honesty instead of judgment. In a world where most connections feel rushed, transactional, performative, what you gave him was different. It was calm, it was safe, it was human. That's why he can't forget. Because what you offered didn't ask him to be more. It simply invited him to be present. And presence is something he has been running from his whole life. So when it was finally offered without demand, he didn't know what to do with it. And now that it's gone, he doesn't know where to find it again. There are moments when he might even wish he could reach out, but not to get you back, to touch that feeling again, that fleeting sense of being enough, even when he was unsure of himself. You made him feel like he didn't have to prove anything. And now, around everyone else, he feels like he does. That contrast is what lingers. It's not about love in the traditional sense. It's about energetic memory, emotional recognition. The imprint left behind when someone meets you in a place deeper than the mind can reach. You may never hear from him again. But know this, his silence is not absence, it's resistance. His distance is not peace, it's noise. And that noise follows him, even now. He cannot forget you, because what you awakened in him was not something he could lose. It was something he never knew he had. And now that it's been touched, it lives with him, quietly, always.